This is Voices for Climate, the podcast where activists, scientists, innovators, and everyday people speak out for our planet. If you're looking for honest conversations, bold ideas, and real climate solutions, you're in the right place. My name is Arnav, and today we're joined by Nathan Ivy. Nate is an instructional coach facilitating the development of a climate literacy and environmental education plan in the Fremont Unified School District. He also represents the school district on the City of Fremont's Environmental Sustainability Commission, which helps guide the city's award-winning climate action plan. Nate was also a member of California's Environmental Literacy Task Force and served as a regional coordinator for the California Department of Education's California Regional Environmental Education Community Network. Nate, it's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation today.
Yeah, so to start off, can you kind of share what inspired you to work on climate literacy and environmental education in the first place?
My roots in education go back to working as environmental tour guides and working in outdoor education programs. Out of college, I helped lead sea kayaking tours in Baja, Mexico. I worked for a cross-country bicycle tour company. And then I had a job at the Coloma Outdoor Discovery School teaching Gold Rush history and environmental education. So it was really what helped me get connected to both bridging nature and inspiring and connecting people. So, I was able to carry that into my early career in the classroom, finding opportunities to get students involved in action projects, improving their community on a wide range of issues. But often it was the environment and the environmental challenges that were, kind of most at top of mind and also afforded students the most opportunities to make a difference. So yeah, I'd say those factors were kind of the early origins. And then just, extending on that, there's such joy and awe and wonder in connecting to nature. And I think it's really important we find opportunities to maintain that connection.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's honestly really nice to hear. And so now I want to talk to you now kind of about what you do right now. So can you elaborate more on what your work is with the Fremont Unified School District?
Sure. I've been working as an instructional coach for the last number of years, supporting teachers. And during the pandemic, students in our district passed a board resolution calling for an educational response to the climate emergency, basically asking the district to develop a K through 12 climate literacy and action plan. And I was really excited about that because, our district has always had some pockets of excellence, some schools and teachers and students. They were really doing some good work, but kind of had lacked a systemic approach, which resulted in some students getting great opportunities and others not. So when that resolution passed, I kind of raised my hand and said, I really want to work on this. So for the last couple of years, in addition to my regular role of supporting teachers, just kind of on all things instruction related, I had the opportunity to organize teachers, students, and community members to figure out how we were going to take that resolution and turn it into reality. Um, Actually, in last year, the district kind of reconfigured my role. And so this year I'm the teacher on special assignment for community partnerships and environmental sustainability. So I'm able to focus 100% of my time on moving this effort forward.
I see. And so, before, how would you describe kind of the changes, if any, like kind of before the resolution was passed versus afterwards, especially in terms of like climate education?
The students passing the resolution, and lots of credit to Shreya Ramachandran and Rishi Gurjar, two students who were particularly active in that movement. It was really a galvanizing moment that gave us a direction, gave us board support, and in many ways gave us permission to do the work that really needed to be done. Um, the other thing I think that's been important in that is, once the resolution was passed, we were able to invite a number of stakeholders to participate in figuring out how to implement this. I think a lot of organizations will pass resolutions, and then kind of go, oh yeah, good, climate literacy done. We passed the resolution. But it's actually where the hard work starts of like, okay, we've got this resolution. How do we live up to it? How do we make it real? How do we think about what climate literacy means in kindergarten? What does age appropriate climate literacy look like? What are the different things we have to think about? Where does it fit into a teacher's regular work? So, in trying to figure out how to implement that resolution, we were able to gather a number of stakeholders, including teachers from different attendance areas in our district, teachers from different grade levels, but most importantly, student representatives at the table to help scope it out. So the resolution was a galvanizing moment, but it really helped us to organize a community around bringing it to life.
That makes sense. So I guess kind of what I'm hearing from you is that it's important for schools to have dedicated plans because that creates a sense of community and kind of creates organization around sort of those shared goals. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there's an interplay between having a plan and a vision and having a community. Um, and I think there's a tipping point. Like I said, our district had always had a number of individual schools or individual teachers or individual students who were doing some really amazing stuff. But in many ways, they were working in isolation. And I think when you're working in isolation, everything feels more like a struggle and more like a fight and kind of you against the world. Um, and so having the resolution allowed us to work together on a common vision. But more importantly, it allowed us to work together to create a community where we're stronger together and not, feeling lonely in the work. So, through that community, in addition to kind of building our vision and building our systems out, we're also able to learn from each other and get inspired and, be inspired by each other's momentum. Uh, to expand the work. So it's been really great over the last couple of years seeing things move forward. And it's really been interesting the way that it's moved beyond just thinking about climate literacy in the classroom, but also thinking about all of the systems of how a school district operates. In our district, we've also been taking some big strides around sustainability initiatives. Our child nutrition services division is working on a pilot project for reusable foodware in our cafeterias. Our transportation department has been electrifying the bus fleet and, is one of the first districts in California to have vehicle to grid charging capacity. We've got our buildings and grounds crew in the city of Fremont partnering to plant trees on our campuses. Um, so having the resolution and then having a group of people work together on creating the vision of how to implement it and engaging all of those partners has really allowed us to work together much more comprehensively. And it's been really fun and joyful.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I like the way you put it earlier, kind of like avoiding the you versus the entire world mentality. And so, in your experience, kind of how has working directly with teachers and students shape your own views on climate change and education? Are there any like memorable moments or, things that kind of stick out to you?
We had to have a lot of conversations about what age appropriate climate literacy and environmental education looked like. Um, and so to do that, we mapped out both what are students learning at different grades, but what also like are the developmental capacities of young people at different ages of their life. And one of the things we really realized for the younger students is we really wanted to help connect them to nature and that scaring them about the challenges of the planet could be really counterproductive. That it's probably inappropriate to bring our adult fears into a space where children are trying to build a relationship with nature. We don't need to lead with the story that the ice caps are melting and the polar bears are dying. That's like a terrible place to begin. It's more amazing to begin with like the joy and wonder of nature. Um, Having those conversations with teachers and students has been really important. But the flip side of that, connecting younger kids to nature, was that we were also becoming more mindful of that our older students and our adults also were lacking those opportunities to have those meaningful connections with nature. So even though like we could, older students and adults could handle more difficult topics or become more aware of some of the challenges, when we were leaving out those connections to nature and the joy and wonder and awe of the natural world around us, it highlighted that we had a challenge there as well. The other thing I'd say that's been really, I don't know if it's surprising, but it's reinforcing is I think we've been doing a lot to confront the idea that climate is a science topic only. And I think when systems think of climate as a science topic and climate change as a science topic, then your only toolkit is science. So science is a really important toolkit for understanding and addressing climate change, but it's not the only one. So we've been really deliberate in making sure that our committees include people with both a humanities perspective and a STEM perspective. And that's opened us up to really thinking about the role of the arts in climate exploration and climate communication, but also like the incredible importance of social studies like economics, history, policy, governance, psychology, like all of those human systems and human decision making and agreement forming systems are the things that have gotten us into the challenges we face. And it's gonna be the tools that we're gonna have to lean on collectively to move beyond this. And just one last point on that. I think one of the other things that's been pleasantly surprising or reinforcing and kind of confirming things that I had believed before was, I think there's a lot of messages people get about their individual responsibility in these challenges. And that if you recycle the right thing and if you make the right decisions, purchasing, all of that, you need to do your part. And one of our students um, brought up the idea of informed apathy that she was noticing among some of her colleagues. That the more they learned about how big the problem was and how small their individual impact was, the more they took an emotionally defensive posture of apathy. Like, I can't care about this. I can't carry this burden by myself. I can't be responsible for fixing this whole problem by deciding what I do with my can at the end of the day or how I get around town and transportation. And that was a sobering moment, right? But I think what we found on the flip side is that the place where real impact can happen is when people take collective action and work together, and that's how systems can change and you can really move the needle. But it's also where you can find community and make great connections and relationships and get that, kind of social recharge for doing this work and making a better place together with others. So yeah, there have been a lot of surprises, but also kinds of things that reinforce or kind of confirm, a worldview that I think is pretty important to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you said. I wanted to, dive deeper into one thing you said before about how, climate change is not just related to science, but also things like history or psychology and whatnot. So, in your experience, when kind of working towards implementing climate education in K to 12 schools, do you find that teachers are willing and able to teach these things in like beyond science classes like math or history or, other subjects? Like how does that work?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been taking a look at like how change happens as part of our work. Um, and there's a tipping point theory of change. When you get a certain amount, a certain portion of the population, it feels like, oh, everybody's doing the thing now. And there's categories of it. One of the first categories of people you want to get on board are the people who are just, let me do this thing. Give me permission. I've been waiting to do this for a long time, but I felt like I couldn't, or there wasn't a space for me to do the thing I really care about. So having a framework where the people who already care about climate and environmental issues are able to clearly see the connections with their curriculum and have encouragement and permission to do it, those let me people get really excited and jump right on board. Um, and then there's the people who are, well, just tell me about how to do this, and I can do it on my own, or show me how to do this, and I'm ready to go. And I think we're trying to figure out how to, now that we have the vision and the plan mapped out and kind of ideas about what should be happening at every grade level, we're trying to figure out how to move into the category of people who are like, I'll do it, but help me. I need some help doing this. So we're starting to figure out, the professional development plans. We have a session tomorrow with teachers in the afternoon, kind of introducing to them some state curricular resources through the Seeds to Solutions program. We've been expanding our garden network efforts. We've been, engaging teachers and helping with tree planting. So there's more help now. And we're now starting to think about the last category that needs to get addressed in this change process, which are the people who are like, oh yeah, make me, make me do this. I dare you. So we think that's a pretty small portion of our community. But people who are vocally negative about something can really bring down the mood, even if it's, one voice out of 100. So we're pretty mindful of that. Yeah, so like thinking about how change happens and what the different groups need and where they are has really kind of helped us map out our strategy for expanding the effort.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another thing I wanted to ask you about that you mentioned before. So you kind of talked about how within K to 12 education, there's obviously different approaches you need to take compared to like kindergartners versus high school students. So, how do you balance that in terms of, kind of slowly introducing these concepts to kindergartners, but then making sure as students get older, they're more informed about what's kind of actually happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we started the work, our first round of this, we started by having a conversation about values and like what values needed to be universal, and what values could we use to know if we were on the right track at every step. So our values in the work is that, anything that we're having students do needs to be action oriented. So it's not, you could learn about the climate by sitting in desks and rows and, listening to a lecture, reading about it in a textbook. And sometimes you need to do that work, but we wanted any of those lessons to result in action. We wanted the work to be equitable so that all schools and students had opportunities. We wanted to be integrated so it wasn't isolated in science, wanted to be age appropriate, and we wanted it to be culturally proficient. So we had to have a lot of conversations about what all of that meant, and also what it looked like at each grade. So what we did is our committee of teachers looked at the educational frameworks and standards at each grade level and kind of went through and looked for anything that was environmentally themed. And then from that environmental theme, we went and looked and tried to figure out which ones of those environmental themes had the strongest climate connections. So we were looking for topics that were already in the curriculum. Interestingly, climate science doesn't show up as a topic until sixth grade. So, it makes sense because it's abstract. It's about these invisible gases in the atmosphere. It's about a whole planet system. So you need some cognitive space, and some foundation to be able to do that thinking. But what we noticed was in the early grades, there were a lot of connections to nature, the investigation of plants and bugs in really early grades. And then in third, fourth, and fifth grade, there were a lot of opportunities where students were starting to learn about environmental systems. So in third grade, there's a lot of emphasis in social studies and in science on weather and weather impacts. And so weather is obviously a climate adjacent topic. So, we've been building out some weather related ways for students to investigate topics. We have a project through Green Schoolyards America called How Cool is Your Schoolyard, where students go out with infrared thermometers and measure the surface temperature of different types of surfaces on their campus. So grass in the shade versus asphalt in the sun versus concrete versus, the playground slides, and trying to think about like, why are these different spaces different temperatures and what can we do about it if it's too hot? Fourth grade has a lot about energy, which obviously connects really strongly to climate when we're thinking about, the fossil fuel industry, but also alternative energy systems. And then fifth grade already had a lot about water in fifth grade. So we've been working with the Alameda County Water District to develop some resources to help students learn about the local water supply in Fremont. There's already lessons about like how water systems work in general, but we're trying to really get it specific to our community and how our local aquifer works and how the Alameda Creek watershed works and how water is treated and distributed in our communities to help them really understand both water systems in general, but specifically, how does water work in our community? So anyway, we've tried to anchor um, the the age appropriateness in being guided by what's already in the standards at different grades.
Got it. Yeah, no, that approach definitely makes a lot of sense. And so, now given kind of all these approaches that you've described, I guess in your opinion, what do you think effective and successful climate education looks like? Like, what would you define as success when it comes to climate education?
Another thing we worked on was a vision for the work. And so I think, our vision really spells it out. And our vision has five parts. And I'll just share it with you. So the first part of our vision is that environmental leadership and action is a shared responsibility within our district. And that the district is known for holding environmental sustainability as a core value. So what it looks like is that like students are doing their part, teachers are doing their part, administrators are doing their part. Everybody's doing their part. Another part of our vision is that all of our teachers and staff attend well-maintained campuses that minimize climate impacts so that, when you're on a campus, you should see examples of the path forward. It looks like strong partnerships with, sustainability initiatives and community organizations. But I think that the part of the vision that gets closest to the question you've asked is it looks like age appropriate and culturally proficient climate literacy and environmental education in the sciences and humanities informs, educates, and empowers all FUSD students to be civically engaged, action-oriented, environmental problem solvers. So that's what we ultimately want. We want them to recognize their power. We want them to be civically engaged. We want them to notice problems and have the capacity to tackle them. And then the last part of our vision is that those efforts are celebrated and that we share that success and we learn from each other.
Wow, yeah, that sounds really amazing, and definitely, obviously, great goals to achieve. And I'm sure while the progress is happening, I was curious, what do you think about how maybe the current like Trump administration, do those policies and kind of things that are going on with the government right now, do those hinder progress in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely puts a damper on the mood.
Mhm.
And we've seen some impacts already. In November, before the election, the U.S. Global Change Project, which is, through NOAA and some other federal agencies, released new climate literacy guidelines that we were really excited about and inspired by. Those have been erased from every federal website. So the new climate literacy guidelines, you can't find them federally anymore. So we bookmarked those, we downloaded copies, and we're still using them as guidance. But the fact that those resources are disappearing or being hidden is really disappointing. But on the flip side, I'll just share a story. One of the partnerships I mentioned is that we're working with the city of Fremont to plant trees. The city of Fremont got a grant from the Cal Fire Urban Forestry Program to plant trees in communities that lack tree canopy. One of our schools, many of our schools are in communities like that. One in particular, Cabrillo Elementary, is one of our schools' Title One districts, one of our district's Title One schools, sorry. And they lacked trees where students had access to. So you go out on the playground, it's a big asphalt blacktop, and then a big field with very few trees where students have access to. So students mapped out the campus. They came up with recommendations of where to plant trees. The city organized volunteers to plant 70 trees. So there was this moment where we were out there planting trees together, and I was standing in this circle of oaks, which is going to become an outdoor classroom. And I was watching, you know, grandmothers and grandfathers, children, teenagers, the mayor, city council members, school board members, and they were all out there planting these trees together. And it was like a week after Inauguration Day when things were already starting to feel kind of terrible about the federal landscape around climate. But there was this moment where our community had come together to do something locally where everybody was participating together, planting trees that aren't going to be big for another 10, 15, 20 years, but everybody's out there working together on a better future in our neighborhood. And like I was filled with the same kind of awe and wonder and inspiration you get from connecting to nature. I was feeling that same awe and wonder and inspiration by being connected to people in a community who are working together to make a better place. So anyway, I think there's that tension between, things can be kind of terrible federally, but also federally is the farthest level of government from our day-to-day life in many regards. And if we keep that in mind and work together in our neighborhoods, there's a lot we can do to make a better place for ourselves. And also to like, I think, get through tough times together.
Yeah, that's a really wholesome story. And I mean, definitely, I agree. It kind of shows how there is still hope. There are still things we can do in our communities, which is, really great to hear. And so, based on everything you've described, it obviously sounds like Fremont Unified School District is definitely one of the biggest, like, kind of powers kind of in this movement. They're doing a lot compared to other schools. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there were a number of school districts who had worked with the Sierra Club Bay Area to pass climate literacy resolutions. I think Oakland was first in the state, Fremont was second in the state, and then Berkeley was third, and LA fourth. And then since that initial kind of pandemic era push, a number of districts have come on board. So we were a pretty early adopter in this space. And again, I would say, one of the key things that has helped us is that it wasn't just passing the resolution and going, okay, resolution is done. It was then using that resolution to get to work. Um, so yeah, I'd say that, folks who've been passing those resolutions and working together are making a big difference. We do like to think of ourselves as a leader. We do like to push ourselves here, but I'm also incredibly grateful for the collaborations I've been able to have with Berkeley and Hayward and Oakland and Livermore. Piedmont is another district who's recently passed a climate literacy resolution. One of our former students in Fremont moved to Dublin and has been doing a lot of incredible work there. Um, so yeah, I think we are in somewhat of a position of leadership, but we're also on a team of really great people across a lot of districts around the state who are imagining and creating a better future. So it's exciting. It's rewarding.
Hmm. Yeah, like if you had like a magic wand or something that would let you kind of implement the policies you would want, what things from the Fremont Unified School District would you try to model in other places that maybe don't have kind of these like policies and initiatives?
Um, I think some of the things that have really worked for us are the degree to which generations of student leadership has been supported in our district. For over 30 years, maybe getting close to 40 years, our district has had a requirement that students do service as part of their graduation requirement. And I think there's been some grumbling about that, but it's also inspired students to really get involved and think about the contribution and the difference they can make. And then we see students growing their capacity to lead and advocate for, policies. And then on our end, on the district side, including students on those committees and those decision-making bodies. So I'd say that's really important for others to consider, like how to really lean into student power. And then, I think another key thing has been really just thinking about ways that climate issues are everybody's responsibility. We can't leave it or assign it only to science to figure out. Like we all have a role to play here. So I think keeping that in mind is also really important.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree, especially with what you just said about how it's kind of everyone's role. And so, with that, I guess my last question to you then is what advice would you give to students and kind of young people who are looking to get involved, maybe making differences in their school districts or their communities, but maybe don't know where to start or like what they can do? What advice would you give them?
Um, I'm always so inspired. I always feel like I'm going to students for advice more than I'm providing advice. But I heard a workshop this weekend at the BayCS, the Bay Area Youth Climate Summit, about this topic. Some of the guidance was, think about what you care about, think about what you're good at, think about where you want to make a difference, and put those things together and, follow your heart. So, um, the other thing is, don't be lonely in the work. Find other people who have similar values or care about similar things and gain inspiration and energy from working together on things you care about.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's such amazing advice and a powerful note to end on. So, Nate, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experiences and insights. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I am really excited that I got to participate in this series and look forward to seeing all the future guests as well.
Yeah, thank you. So, that's all we have today on Voices for Climate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the show and share it with someone who cares about building a more sustainable future. And I'll see you all next time.